This is an exclusive excerpt from the Stuph File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Relationship coach Frank Kermit is back on the show. Recently, he wrote an article dealing with singles, specifically singles who apparently have been shunned because they've been single too long. I didn't even know this was a thing. Frank is here to talk about it via Skype from right here in Montreal. Hi, Frank.
How are you, Peter?
Just tickety-boo. Nice to have you back on the program. So, apparently there's a shelf life to being single?
Very much so. Based on what I'm getting from my client base, if they meet someone who has been single, quote-unquote, too long, it might be a reason that they don't want to continue dating the person. And the other side of my client base, those singles who have been single for a very long time, are reporting that they're struggling to find someone to be very accepting of it.
Okay, what is the problem that I guess the other party has with dating someone who's been single a long period of time?
Generally speaking, they're very worried about being abandoned. The idea that they're going to get attached and that the person that they want to date who has been single a long time probably is used to being alone, may not get attached as easily, and might simply be in a position to say, well, you know, I really do like you, but I'm not really into dating and relationships. I wanted to try it out, but it's really not for me. Nobody wants to face rejection and abandonment from someone they like, and if they sense that that's likely what's going to happen, it can turn a few people away.
Are these people who are turned off by those who have been single a long period of time, are they coming from a theory, or are they coming from a situation rather that it's just a theory, or are they coming from previous experience with dating someone who may have been single for a long period of time?
Okay, that's a really, really good question. And what I can tell you, based on the people I have coached who have been single a long time, is that there's actually some truth to the fact that they cut things off very, very quickly. They may go out on a date 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 times and then say, oh, it's really not for me. When they're just not in the habit of giving someone a chance and continuing the dating process. So there actually is some merit to these concerns. When I'm coaching, let's say, people who maybe have never been in a relationship, sometimes adult-aged virgins, their MO tends to be very similar. They may even try to date somebody once in a while, but before things get too serious, they abandon it. They say, well, I didn't really feel strongly enough for it. Or they just didn't want to mess up their lives. Someone who's been single a long time, and for the record, okay, I need to say this for the record, there's nothing wrong with being single. If you're happy being single, there's no issue. Just continue your life and enjoy what life has to offer you. It's only a problem if you've been single for a long time and you don't want to be single anymore, but the behavior patterns that you've gotten used to in being single are interfering with your chances to possibly connect with somebody new.
Okay, so this theory, and I'm going to say just a theory right now, of this behavior pattern, if this theory is indeed correct, should the person who is about to date someone who may have gone through a long period of time of being single, if they're asking that person about their past, should they be talking about their immediate past? And the reason why I say that, if someone gets hooked up with someone who has been single for a long period of time, the theory you're discussing may be true. But what if that person had been in a series of short-term relationships after a long period of having been single? In other words, what I'm getting at is, does this situation, if this theory is accurate, is this situation correctable, or is someone who had a long patch of singleness doomed to have this type of personality trait even if they've had some short-term relationships after?
Brilliant question. Absolutely brilliant question. My answer is this. It depends what happened in those short-term relationships.
Okay.
So let's use some specific examples here, okay?
Sure.
Somebody who has been single for, let's say, between 5 and 10 years, and then enters into a relationship may not have certain behavior patterns such as conflict resolution behaviors. You see, when somebody is single and living alone and they end up in a conflict with somebody, they don't necessarily have the motivation to deal with the conflict at hand. They can afford to say, I just won't deal with this person for the next few weeks and I'll calm down and then maybe we'll reconnect and be friends again. Maybe we won't. But they have that ability to take that kind of distance. A little more difficult to do when you are getting romantically involved with someone where it might be getting serious, or even if you're living with someone. So when that major conflict happens, that first fight, as it were, after the honeymoon phase is over when dating, and you don't know how to handle that first fight, you don't know how to get beyond that point, and it's just easier for you to walk away from it. If that is the pattern that has ended every short-term relationship that person has been in, then yes, it could be an issue because now we're dealing with the repeating behavior pattern that ended those short-term relationships. So that's one example. You can't simply say that, well, since they've been single for a long time and they've had a bunch of short-term relationships, that the problem is solved. It really depends why those short-term relationships ended.
Now, I guess we're assuming here that when we're talking about people who have gone through a long period of time without being in a relationship, we're talking about people who don't have extenuating circumstances, like someone who was widowed or a widower and was raising young children, or someone who got out of a long-term relationship, either a marriage or whatever, after a long period of time. That there isn't extenuating circumstances as to why they haven't been dating, correct?
To answer that question, it has less to do with the mitigating circumstances as to why they've been single for such a long time. So whether they were widowed and just went through a mourning process that lasted a few years, whether it's a matter of they went through a nasty divorce and they just said, that's it, I'm not interested, whether it was they're just very, very unlucky and no matter who they tried to date, they just didn't know how to attract the person or they just got constantly rejected. The issue is not why they've been single as much as do they know how to behave for a relationship. And some people understand the concept that if I'm in a relationship, it's not just about what I'm going to get from the other person, it's also about what I'm going to give. And someone who, let's say, is not in the habit of giving and taking care of someone and being vulnerable with someone, if those behavior patterns are not the norm for that person, it can make it much more difficult to get into that relationship. Now, as you mentioned, you said there's cases of people who have been horribly hurt in a nasty divorce, people who have been widowed, and maybe they're still in mourning and they're dealing with guilt issues about the idea of moving on to another partner. So there could be those reasons involved. But I think that's a separate issue than someone who simply doesn't know how to behave in a relationship because it's just been so long.
But people are also conditioned by the experiences they either have or didn't have. You just gave an example. They haven't been in a relationship for a long period of time, so they don't know how to behave in a relationship. But it's also possible that they could have been before in the wrong relationship. So, I mean, you behave based on the experiences and examples that you're thrust into.
That is an amazing observation. I so love being on your show. I so love being on the Stuph File. You really just know how to get to the crux of the matter. Yes, a person's experiences can in fact shape the behavior patterns that they develop. Here's where it gets different, and this is where my role as a coach comes in. If someone says, every relationship I've been in has been a disaster, there's a common element in every relationship you've been in. You. So if you made a mistake and you dated someone that was incompatible for you, did you learn from that and did you take those learnings into your decision process as to who you were going to date next? If you did, chances are your relationships at every new relationship that comes along gets better and better for you. If not, well, you're going to keep getting into lousy relationships, and that, of course, could turn somebody off because it doesn't teach them how to be in a relationship. And then one day, they wake up and say, that's it. I want a relationship, but I don't want to repeat what I've done in the past. And that's where they'll seek someone like myself, a coach, who can give an objective outsider view, someone outside themselves to say, well, it makes sense that you ended up in that situation because these are the behaviors you exhibited that attracted that kind of person to you. Here are some new behaviors for you to try so that you actually end up in a relationship with the type of person you want. So if someone wants to take on the role of personal growth, self-actualization, that's what we do in coaching. So I will take somebody and I'll say, okay, tell me exactly what you want. And then I'll look at what they're doing right now that pushes that away, and I will look at things that they're doing that is helping them along that path.
Always an education having you on the program, sir. I mentioned in the introduction that this was something you wrote about in an article. Where can people find that article?
Well, I've actually submitted articles to the Pornhub Sexual Wellness Center. It's a division of Pornhub where people can go to get information on sex, relationships, sexual health. It's a really, really great resource. I'm one of the contributors there, and the article that I wrote is entitled, Is Being Single for Too Long a Red Flag for Dating?
So just like the old saying about Playboy magazine, there are some people who go to Pornhub for the articles.
There are. Actually, there are.
Frank, always a pleasure to have you on the program. How can people find you otherwise?
Just go right to my website, franktalks.com, franktalks.com. If you want to buy one of my books, if you want to pick up one of my audio programs, if you want to sign up even for just an hour of coaching to see what Frank can do for you, the one thing I offer is that I'm always frank, because I have to be. And I'm not going to say something to spare your feelings. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to hear. And sometimes people are okay with that, sometimes they're not. But they know that that's what they're looking for when they want a frank coach.
Frank, thank you for being on the program with us once again.
Thank you, sir. Be well.
Relationship coach Frank Kermit. You can check out his website at franktalks.com to find out more about his upcoming events. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com to the What's On page for this show, which is show number 0446, and you'll find the links to his site.
You've just heard an exclusive excerpt from the Stuph File program with Peter Anthony Holder. To hear any or all of the full hour-long shows, visit thestuffile.com. Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's thestuffile.com. A presentation of Flying Fish Communications.
Need help with love, sex, dating and relationships? Visit